Hey, Chris.
Yeah, do you want to
Saw your
so we can
email.
get it?
I know about inflation, but I'm paying. That's my short answer.
Okay. Good evening. Would you stand with me for the invocation and pledge of allegiance, please?
Let's pray. Father, Lord, we come to you. We thank you for the many blessings you've given us over our lives. There's many hurts out there, Lord, and we just pray sometimes. Really don't know what to pray, but other than your grace and your love, be upon them, Father. We just pray now that you would touch everyone here. Be with the council members, Lord. Give them wisdom. And thank you for the many blessings you've given us again. These things we ask in your name. Amen.
Amen. Councilman Bibby, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to call to order this regular session of the Vienna City Council for June the 22nd, 2023. Let the record reflect that I've taken roll. All members of council are present this evening. Having a quorum, we will proceed. First item on our agenda this evening is our public forum. We have two that have signed up to speak this evening. We will start with Mr. Chad Emmerich.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Chad Emmerich, and I am a Vienna resident. I'm here to speak about the issue on the agenda, item number 2, in raising the codified bid process from $10,000 to $25,000. I have worked in government budgeting, fund management, and have been a contract officer for much of my career. Even on minor government card charge purchases, we are required to get a pricing from 3 different sources and submit this with our request while providing justification on why we are requesting to purchase items from a particular vendor. When it comes to any contract, we must get at least 3 bids on all non-personal services contracts, regardless of the amount. This is all done and approved before any money is committed or any contract is executed. When it comes to spending taxpayers' money, we should never look for easier ways to do it. This leads to misappropriation of funds and cases of waste, fraud, and abuse. Red tape is there for a reason. It's to protect the taxpayer's dollar, and it's also to protect the individuals approving the funds and spending the funds. I have seen many government careers end simply because the system and policies were not adhered to and followed. I would suggest rather than raising the limit, you look for ways to make the process more efficient while adhering to strict spending guidelines. Remember, this is not about making your job as an elected official easier, but it is about doing the right thing and protecting city funds. We also need to look for ways that we can shut down any other means to bypass a series of purchases, such as making a purchase on a fence that has 4 sides. That fence could cost $40,000 and would need to be approved. We could go out and get each side of the fence paid for in $10,000 increments. That would be an example of bypassing a procedure that should be followed and be in place. At a time when public trust in government spending is at an all-time low, we should look for ways to protect taxpayer money and that passes public scrutiny rather than loosening requirements and making it easier for others to abuse them. Thank you.
Brenda Powell.
Good evening. I appreciate being here this evening. I wanted to say that I would like I applaud all of those that use their microphones. It's wonderful that you do that because then it can be heard on the recordings or the live streams. Especially Mr. Leach, Councilman Leach, for your update that you gave the last time on Spencer's, or on the John Mansfield project. You couldn't really hear everything that you said prior, just bits and pieces. So it would be appreciated for those, that are not using their microphones as they should, if they would, please, for the public. I wanted to say that I have spoke many times in regards on social media and possibly even here in council regarding the Jackson pool and the updates that goes along with them. It's important for the public to know where the funding is coming from for this project, whether it be grants, bonds, financing, donations, sponsorships, whatever it may be. It would be nice to give the people the update on any money that has come in towards this project. I know that it's not to the point of doing anything with it at this time, but we need to know where it's coming from and what has been received. That's something that I wanted to bring forward. The other thing I wanted to say has to do with the senior citizens building and the fact that they don't have a Facebook page, and how important it is to the public, the community, to have a Facebook page that they can go to see what activities, what is scheduled for whatever it may be, events, all of those things. And they really need to have a Facebook page to be able to do that. I don't know whether you can create an umbrella that it could fall underneath of the city. But controlling it and saying what they can and cannot do, I don't understand that. They function through a budget just like any other department does. And it should be allowed for them to do for the community at any level. I know that some things are posted on the website for exercise classes and different things and whatnot, but they really need to have their own Facebook page in order to be able to really interact and connect with the seniors in our community. So that's all I needed to say tonight. Thank you.
The minutes from the June the 8th, 2023 meeting will be approved at the next council meeting. We will do them both at that time. Excuse me. We have no unfinished business, so this evening we'll move on to new business. First item on our agenda this evening is a resolution approving and authorizing the City of Vienna to engage Burgess & Nyepel to perform engineering services in conjunction with the design of the kayak launch. A resolution approving and authorizing the City of Vienna to engage Burgess & Nyepel to perform engineering services in conjunction with the design of the kayak launch. Be it resolved by the Common Council of the City of Vienna, based upon the interview and scoring process undertaken by the Kayak Committee, formed with the purpose of interviewing potential qualified engineering candidates, that it hereby approves Burgess & Nyepel, the highest scoring firm, a qualified and credentialed engineering firm, to perform engineering and design services related to the City of Vienna kayak launch project. Further, the mayor and/or his designee is authorized to execute any agreements or related documentation necessary to engage Burgess & Nyepel for engineering services related to the design of said project. I'll entertain a motion for the approval. Excuse me, I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the resolution approving and authorizing the City of Vienna to engage Burgess & Nyepel to perform engineering services in conjunction with the design of the kayak launch.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the resolution. I would like to make a statement before I open it up for anyone else. because we went through the RFQ process and because this was the preliminary engineering to get all of the design work needed in order to get this project out to bid, our city attorney, instructed me that I should have done this, and so that's the reason why it's on there tonight. The work that Burgess and Nyepel is to do a full set of signed plans, all specifications associated with the project, the construction estimate, a listing of all the permits that are needed, the land surveys, the bathymetric survey, which is the river depth, so we'll know how far out that we have to put the kayak launch, designing alternative layouts, meeting with the city, and as I said before, the preliminary cost estimate for the project. So that's why it's on there this evening. The estimate that Burgess and Nyepel gave for this was $24,900. We have $75,000 in the current budget for that project, and so that is where the funding will come from it. Any further comments?
I just want to make sure to be very clear, I probably should recuse myself from this, since Pickering Associates also had kind of submitted and went through this RFQ process.
So they did submit.
Yes.
They submitted.
Yeah. Okay.
So when you recuse yourself, you have to actually don't eat all chocolate. Yeah, the almond joys are.
Yes, sir, Tom.
This has been discussed before, but I can't remember exactly how much study was done as regard to the currents in the river. Different parts of the river have different currents.
Yes, they do. And the location at 12th Street is much slower than the current up at Spencer's Landing. That current that is there, there's a lot more speed right there. And so that was the primary reason for moving it from there to 12th Street, because you want a slower current in order to get into a kayak.
So it's slow enough.
Yes, sir.
I have a question. Has Burgess and Nyepel, have they started on this project and have they been paid for some of it already?
They have not been paid anything, and they have started.
They have started on preliminary plans?
They have.
Okay.
All right. Hearing no further discussion, and I'll call for the question. All those in favor of the resolution approving and authorizing the City of Vienna to engage Burgess and Nyepel to perform the engineering services in conjunction with the design of the kayak launch, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed, motion carries unanimously.
Just make use of recuse.
Yeah.
The next item on our agenda this evening is an ordinance amending 105.1.02 open market purchases, competitive bidding purchases, increasing the amount triggering the competitive bid requirement from $10,000 to $25,000, increasing the non-competitive bid, non-three price purchasing limit for materials and equipment from $1,000 to $2,500. Be it ordained by the Common Council of the City of Vienna that 105.02B of the Vienna Municipal Code is hereby amended as follows. Except as otherwise provided herein, all purchases of materials, supplies, and equipment for procurement by the city shall be competitive bidding where the estimated cost of value of such materials, supplies, or equipment exceeds the amount of $25,000. Item B2. For the purchase of materials, supplies, and equipment for procurement by the city of a value more than $2,500 and less than $25,000, the purchasing agent shall obtain and submit three prices from the open market of said materials, supplies, and equipment, unless such materials, supplies, and equipment are only obtainable from two or fewer sources. In any event, the purchasing agent shall purchase the lowest price qualifying material, supply, and/or equipment. I'll entertain a motion for the approval on first reading of the ordinance amending 10502 open market purchases.
So move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the ordinance on first reading. Is there any further discussion?
I do have a couple questions. I just want to make sure that I understand that. Is this simply saying, as I read it and as heard, between $2,500 and $25,000, that the process would be getting 3 quotes for the material or the purchase?
Yes.
Is there and was there, was there a specific incident or an issue or a problem that prompted this change from the $10,000 to the $25,000? I mean, that's a $15,000 increase.
The price of everything has grown so high in the last 2 to 3 years that the $10,000 limit that we have operated under for so long, almost everything that you would purchase, you would have to literally go out for bid. And that bidding process can slow things down for anywhere between 6 weeks to 3 months. Has to be noticed in the newspaper. It has to, there's a whole series of steps that has to be done. And because things have gone, they're just unbelievable how expensive everything is now. And so that's the only reason. It makes it so cumbersome when you try to get materials and stuff to work with that it slows the whole process down. And the other part of it, the 1,000 to 2,500, you typically shop for the best bargain that you can get. And when we are audited, we want to make sure that we have showed our due diligence in order to take care of those issues. And so that's part of the issue, that we try to do our best to find multiple suppliers. But there are some products that you just cannot find on the market.
So if something would go out to bid, basically there would have to be specifications drawn up, and it'd have to be notified and published, and there's a time frame involved in getting that information back. Getting 3 quotes, who makes the decision where those quotes come from?
Whoever the department head is that is requesting to make the purchase. Our ordinance requires that you find 3. A lot of time, Roger, they come off the internet. There aren't very many suppliers in our local area for some things, and so you basically have to scramble around to try to find 3 suppliers.
So those 3 bid, or so those 3 quotes, then would be submitted to purchasing for the purchasing of the issuing of the purchasing order for whatever it is that was quoted.
The 3 items that would be selected, the lowest price is typically the one that you have to take, with the exception of if Rogers Pipe Supply said, yes, I can give you this, but I can't get you delivery for 6 months, then that puts if we need it for a project now, even if the price is better, sometimes we cannot wait in order to get those products.
But they would need to be apples to apples.
If they're apples to apples, low price.
Okay, thank you.
I have a few questions as well. I guess I understand inflation is a real thing, especially in the last 3 to 5 years. I have a hesitancy to agree that it is of the increase that we are placing here. So do we have examples, or is there any kind of hard evidence that the city has to show that we have typical standard projects that are typically under that $10,000 range that now all of a sudden are above that $10,000 range, where we're having to go out to bid a lot more frequently?
The estimate to go to $25,000 was based on most of the cities in West Virginia that have a $25,000 ceiling. It's just the price of things has gone so high.
I understand, and that's what I'm asking. In specifically in the city of Vienna, do we have, like, have we seen an increase of, you know, projects and purchases and things start to exceed a $10,000 limit, where now we are being required to go out to bid a lot more often?
Most of the projects that we deal with that are very expensive always go out to bid because they're very expensive.
Right.
Okay. And so I can't give you a number of how many. I can certainly find that number for you, but I don't have it today.
Okay, I guess my concern there too, and then on the other side of that is how many of those things that are now exceeding that $10,000 range have increased so much that they're over a $25,000 range. That seems like a huge jump for me. Has there been like projects recently where we have seen things jump 250% ish in cost?
The biggest example for that's plastic pipe. Plastic pipe's just out of sight. Okay.
Okay.
And so, you know, those are, I mean, but tell me something that's gone down in cost.
Well, I'm not saying that anything has gone down in cost.
They just don't.
Right, but so that kind of goes to my other question. When was the last time we increased this?
That's one of the questions I was going to ask. It seems like it hadn't been all that long ago that we went to the $10,000.
June 2019. It was
June 2019?
June 2019, it was $5,000. That was during your council session, Roger. I wasn't on council at that time. But so that's less than 5 years ago. We went from $5,000 to $10,000 in June of 2019. And now today, 4 years
Which
later,
was $5,000.
it was $5,000 in 2019 and we changed it to $10,000.
Okay.
So now we're going to consider changing it to $25,000.
Yeah, I guess that's where I get a little concerned. That seems like a fairly recent change. And I know that the pandemic has caused kind of a hiccup with things, but I don't know that things have changed that drastically. And I think that that number is just too much for me. It seems really kind of a huge leap from $10,000 to $25,000. And then I know you mentioned this, but like the city of Parkersburg or Williamstown or like nearby communities, is that fairly common around here to have $25,000? Is that limit?
The cities of our size. And I do believe Parkersburg is 25, but I'm not positive on that.
Okay. And I don't know if that's fair to ask because I haven't had time to look that up. But and then my other concern as well with the Part B, from the $1,000 to $2,500, just so I can kind of fully understand the implication of that. This means that anything under $2,500 does not have to have three like bids or three quotes, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, anything $1,000 or under presently only is you're allowed to buy it on the open market.
Yeah.
This would change it to $2,500.
Okay, and that, you know, as Mr. Emmerich said earlier, it's fairly common practice, especially in most businesses, let alone government agencies, to have to get three bids for just about any purchase you make.
Many of the counties and municipalities in West Virginia have very similar structure, because there are some things that are day to day that you just need to get, that it's not worth the time to go out and find three prices for boxes of paper clips. So what you try to do is try to balance, you know, making sure that the employees in the city stays in check with practical day-to-day things.
Yeah, I guess, and that's where, again, I don't know that increase there really makes a lot of sense, because those kind of day-to-day materials I don't think have increased 2.5 times. And again, I think, especially us as council, we are kind of responsible for being, you know, fiscally responsible for taxpayer money. And just as like a personal resident, I would rather see a lot more oversight than a lot less oversight. And this seems like we're opening up the door for a lot of things to start happening without it coming before, excuse me, without it coming before council or kind of being talked about publicly. And I think that just kind of raises a few red flags for me. So I guess I'm really hesitant to see this move forward, but that's all.
I'm not as concerned as the purchases on the lower end of the resolution on the 1,000 to 2,500 as I am the 10,000 to the 25,000. June of 2019 seems like it was yesterday that we did that. On a $5,000 change, and this is a $15,000, and Mayor, you say that that's kind of based on cities similar size to Vienna. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
And I can also add to that, Roger, the Water Quality Association, simply because of the expense of all of these, they've made it a threshold, if that's a correct word, to say that, that is a recommended number. But honestly, if you're not comfortable with the 25, amend it. It's very simple. Just amend it. I'll take whatever number we can get, and we've got responsible department heads. They've been here a long time.
Yeah, I think that maybe amending it might be, to me, might be a better way to go. I'm not one that keep going back and changing things and keep redoing resolutions over and over and over. But we could possibly, like you said, amend it to a lesser amount, and then watch it and maybe revisit it, a little later down the road. And I think that I would be more comfortable with that myself. As far as a figure to amend it to, I'm still kind of bouncing that back and forth in my brain right now. So, certainly we can talk about a number if on an amendment, I guess.
All right. Yes, sir, Tom?
I have a lot of things that we buy almost doubled in price in the last 5 years, like plastic pipe.
Plastic pipe has went way more than doubled, but, that's only one item right there. Everything has gone up. It's just the process of going out to bid. Literally, you must allow, you got to notify, you have to post it in the newspaper, you have to have allow time for all the bids to come in. It is just very cumbersome to do that.
I have a question. Are you still thinking? Okay. So as the caretakers of the city's finances and money, I still kind of look at this as we still approve the budget. Whatever money they are spending, if a department head is now able to purchase something for $1,500 without, having to, send that out or anything or get bids on that, or if, it's that $20,000 purchase and they're able to go ahead and get 3 bids on that, it's still within their budget. And I'm looking at this, I think, more from a department head standpoint. These are people that we've entrusted to take care of the various areas of the city. And so I kind of feel like, if anything, we've approved their budget and they know what they have to operate within. And so that hasn't changed. And now we're giving them the ability to make the judgments within their department that are best going to serve them. And I don't think it is, I don't think that it is a way to try to get around anything. I really do see this more as a real help to the people who are running the city. You know, because for the most part, we're not running the city. We make the financial decisions, and then those department heads who've been here a lot longer than we have are the ones that are actually making the purchases and are tied in closely, and they understand the bidding and the companies and the supplies and all of that. So personally, I am comfortable with these changes. If an amendment comes to change one of these, I could be open to that as well. But I do think that an increase for each of these areas is warranted. And because we still oversee the budget as a whole, and we review things, monthly, through the budget reports and that kind of thing, I don't see this being abused.
Can I hop in on this before I saw you were ready to go again, Roger? So, yes, we approve the budget, but council oversight is really how we keep this discretionary spending in check. And I think that's a very important job that we need to do. And it's that's our primary job, really. And there's been a lot of discussion about what other cities do. I actually looked it up. So Vienna, we're the 14th largest city in West Virginia. So I tried to find some cities similar size. South Charleston has a population of 13,352 people, and they have their threshold is set at $10,000. Martinsburg has a population of 18,502 people, and their threshold is set at $7,500. Wheeling has a population of 27,000 people, and their threshold is at $5,000. I mean, yeah, there are plenty of cities also that have a threshold of $25,000. But, I mean, that's the state limit. And you think about it, that's what the state of West Virginia does. It's say, $25,000. If it's going to be a project of $25,000 or greater, then they're going to have to do the competitive bid process. Now, we have a budget in Vienna of $11 million. The state of West Virginia has a budget of $5 billion plus. So I guess it's just how you feel personally about how we manage our money and what the oversight process is. And I have complete respect for all of our department heads. That's not the issue. I think they all do a good job. But I think when you increase this from $10,000 to $25,000, it opens it up for a lot of discretionary spending that goes without council approval. And while I understand this evening that inflation's being the reason for this, I don't necessarily agree with that, because there's been some spending that's happened here lately that really should have gone to council for approval. And, without going into all of that, it didn't happen. And I think that's why this is on the agenda this evening. And the mayor made a comment about projects like plastic pipe. Yeah, plastic pipe. I'm on the Vienna Utility Board. That has skyrocketed more than double. But if you're going to do an infrastructure project, it's going to be over $25,000. That's always going to go out to bid. That's not really a comparative thing. One of the projects that didn't go out to bid, in my opinion, that should have gone out to bid was there were new ball fields, 2 new ball fields created at the base of the sled hill, because we needed to increase ball fields. Everybody knew about it. There was a plan to put these 2 ball fields at the base of that hill. Well, those 2 ball fields are contiguous. They are together. But for whatever reason, they went out and got 3 proposals for fencing, but then decided to do one fence at a time. And one fence was $8,500, so it was below, or $8,600, so it was below the $10,000 threshold. So it didn't have to go to council. Okay, but then they turned around and did the other fence for also $8,600, so it was close to $17,000. It didn't come before council. It should have come before council. It was installed on the exact same day. I watched those guys do it. So how can you say, well, we're going to pay half now and half later? I mean, our ordinances address that. You can't subdivide something like that. And so when I see something like that happen, and I have other examples, but when I see something like that happen, for me, that just throws up a red flag that says, hey, let's not make this easier for stuff like that to happen. Because you know what? We talk about approving the budget, those new ball fields were not in the budget. And during the budget time, Chris and I specifically remember asking about that. And we were told, all the changes that were going to need to be made to accommodate everything that was decided that, VRIA would take over, and we need to do all these changes to accommodate all the kids that want to play soccer and baseball and whatever. That's great. All those things are happening, but we asked about how much it was going to cost, and not very much. We don't know, this and that and the other, and we never put it in the budget. Okay? So now you have $17,000 that goes out on these ball fields. It doesn't come before council for approval. You had the moving of the trailer. That was close to $20,000. That didn't go out to council. So I think there's a lot of reasons not to approve this tonight. Okay? And I mean, $5,000 less than 4 years ago to $10,000, and then now tonight we're saying $10,000 to $25,000, and we're saying that the reason is inflation. I don't think so. I think we have some other stuff going on, and I think it's our job, and I take it very seriously about council oversight, and it's not a reflection on the department heads. They're used to this system and are doing just fine with it. So I'm against it completely.
We recently did a budget revision, and we absolutely have department heads that some of them have been here for 35 plus years. And these people know the city of Vienna. They know their jobs. They know their employees. And we have an $11 million budget, and in that last budget revision, we transferred $1.8 million out of carryover back to the general fund. Now, you've got a group of adults here that run the city of Vienna that were thrifty enough and used their heads enough to figure out how to save $1.8 million out of an $11 million budget. And yes, the city of Vienna has been very profitable, and so some of our revenues did increase. But I can tell you right now that without the people that are in each of these departments doing their due diligence every day, you will never have that kind of carryover. And to run an $11 million budget and be able to carry over $1.8 million into the next general fund for the next year is an incredible amount of money. And so I have a lot of faith in the people that they know what it takes to run these things. They know what the system requires. Okay? But I just don't like this undertone. Okay? So.
Can I ask one last question?
Yes, sir.
Quick? So in respect to the department heads, have they come and been complaining about this to you, about having issues recently that this is being brought up now?
Yes, and I don't get any money to spend, Chris. Okay?
No, I understand.
So this is not, this is not.
I'm not.
Something.
Yeah,
Okay?
I'm asking if the department heads have been saying, "Hey, this $10,000 threshold is becoming a real thorn in my side," because all of a sudden now I have to put things out for bid that I normally didn't have to.
Yes.
So,
Okay.
regarding what you just said, Mayor, about the money being returned to the carryover, part of the reason we have more money now is because of inflation, and we bring in more 1% sales tax and more B&O tax, okay? And as somebody who follows the budget really closely, for years, the finance director never made any changes to the revenue side, okay? So there's a lot of built in, to order to get that carryover. And I'm not disparaging the department heads. I think they do a good job of managing the money. That's not the issue, but I think that's a mischaracterization of why we have so much excess money.
Is there any further discussion?
I completely agree with what has been said about the department heads, and we've seen it from years. They're good stewards of the city's money, and they understand it. We understand it. The general public doesn't always understand it. And I think that's where sometimes that we get a bad rap, on expenditures. I'm not saying an increase is not necessary. In fact, I would say probably that it is very necessary. My issue, and I am going to, if I'm able at this point, I want to make a motion if we could amend that figure, instead of going from $10,000 to $25,000, and I'm going to be very open with this figure, and it's doubling it, but go to $20,000. I think that just softens the blow for a little bit, for this particular resolution.
Are you making an amendment to adjust that number 20,000?
I am indeed.
All right.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we amend the ordinance on first reading to reflect $20,000 instead of $25,000. Is there any discussion?
Not on the amendment, but I do have some comments about.
Come to you just in a moment. Sure. All right. It's been moved and seconded that we reduce the amount from $25,000 to $20,000. All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed? All right. So the ordinance, when we'll read it again in a moment, it will reflect $20,000. All right. Mr. Leach, back to the main ordinance, please.
So, two reasons for this this ordinance resolution have been put forth. One is because of inflation, and then the counter to that is that there are other things going on here. The discussion has been City Council has the responsibility to provide oversight and stewardship of the city's financial affairs, which is true. However, what's not been discussed is even with the department heads, and we can't consider this based on who our current department heads are, okay? We have to consider this based on what is prudent regardless of who, because is there opportunity for abuse? Is there opportunity for all these bad things that we're talking about? What wasn't discussed is that below the level of oversight by City Council, we have checks and balances within our departments. The finance director is reviewing these proposed expenditures. Are they budgeted? Do we need a budget revision? Is it appropriate to do this? Also, how many times have we seen when we've gone out to the competitive bidding process, we get one bid, okay? And it's delayed the progress on our project for 3 months, however long it takes to put this through the budget and finance and the bid process to do that. So there has to be a level of trust. And I've seen in the time I've been on council, when you talk about undertones, there's been an undertone of gotcha public service where it's been micro. It's like, it's not what's in the best of the city. It's like when we passed the resolution that you're supposed to send an email to the liaison. And yet, notwithstanding that, Councilperson Williams has continued to email the finance director with questions, and just in the last budget and finance meeting just said she sends them to you anyway, while the finance director doesn't. And it's not her responsibility to do so. It's Councilperson Williams. And I think that's a good example of this gotcha public service that's been an undertone in the time that I've been on council and I don't agree with. So actually, I think that, with respect to the inflation and the trust in department heads, we don't necessarily trust department heads. We hold them accountable. But I think giving discretion these times to be able to streamline city operations and to be able to effectively conduct our business within a way that is responsible and accountable, both at the level of city council and also at the level of the operation of the administration of the city and the department heads. And actually, I would move to amend this to 17.5, and I would move to amend the 1,000 to 2,500 to 1,000 to 2,000. And I think those are reasonable accommodations that balance the needs of the citizens of the city to operate without being totally encumbered. You know, and because I've been thinking about, like you say, like Councilperson Williams said, you know, infrastructure projects involving PVC, well, that could also be as simple as the bathrooms we put in Spencer's Landing a couple of years ago in PVC. Okay, so I think that an increase is warranted. I'm not comfortable with $25,000 either. I'm not even comfortable with $20,000. I think 17.5 is a reasonable accommodation that balances the trust we have in our department heads and the administration of our city and our ability to see what's going on, also considering that these amounts have been budgeted or would be subject to a budget revision. So my amendment would be, my motion to move to amend would be to 17.5 and to 2,000 for the thresholds where these responsibilities are triggered.
So we have an amendment on the floor to reduce the amount to 17.5 on the top and 2,000 on the lower.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded that we adjust the amounts from $20,000 as amended to 17.5 and to go from 2,500 to 2,000 on the lower end. Is there any further discussion?
I have a comment. I'm not for amending anything. I think $10,000 is a real good place for us to be. This is government. This is not private business. You know, government moves a little slower, as we all know. It's set up to be that way. We all know how that works. And I'm sorry that Councilperson Leach thinks that I'm playing some kind of gotcha politics. I'm not. I'm trying to be responsive to the residents of Vienna who frequently contact me about X, Y, or Z things that happen in the city of Vienna. So with regard to his comments, Rye did not copy him into an email that I sent to Mrs. Roberts, the finance director. I am on the Tree and Beautification Commission, okay? I serve as council's liaison to that. I initially contacted Mrs. Roberts about the walking trail that was asphalted down at 28th and 1st Avenue, the pollinator garden, that piece of property that is being developed for, you know, passive recreation, because that project didn't go before council. And so I find it very curious to me that as somebody who sits as a liaison on that committee, I was never emailed that we were going to pave that. It was supposed to be in next year's budget, not this current budget year, okay? It didn't go out to council. It's my understanding from later that we spent $41,000 on that. Didn't come before council. There was money applied from some grants. I didn't know about that either. So I think if you want things to work, it's kind of a two-way street, because I, as the liaison to the tree beautification, that's why I contacted Mrs. Roberts about that. So
we have an amendment on the floor, reducing the amount from 20,000 to 17.5 on the top end, and from 2,000 or from 2,500 to 2,000 on the lower end. All those in favor of the amendment as presented, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed? The amendment passes. Mr. Skogstad, would you please read the ordinance as it, on first reading, as it has been amended, sir?
Just give me a second. This is an ordinance amending 10502, the open market purchases. The competitive bid purchases, competitive bidding purchases increase the amount triggering the competitive bid requirement from $10,000 to $17,500, increasing the non-competitive bid non-three price purchasing limit for materials and equipment from $1,000 to $2,000. Being ordained by the Common Council of the City of Vienna, that 10502B of the Vienna Municipal Code is hereby amended as follows. B1, except as otherwise provided herein, all purchases of materials and equipment for procurement by the city shall be by competitive bidding where the estimated cost or value of such materials, supplies, or equipment exceeds the amount of $17,500. Paragraph B2, for the purchase of materials, supplies, and equipment for procurement by the city of a value more than $2,000 and less than $17,500, the purchasing agent shall obtain and submit three prices from the open market of said materials, supplies, and equipment, unless said materials, supplies, and equipment are only obtainable from two or fewer sources. In any event, the purchasing agent shall purchase the lowest price qualifying material, supply, and/or equipment.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the ordinance on first reading as amended. All those in favor of the ordinance as amended on first reading, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed? Motion carries on first reading 5-2. It will be on the next agenda on our first meeting in July. Next item on our agenda this evening is item number 3. It's an internal budget revision. Jim, do you have that in front of you?
Yes.
Thank you.
This is internal budget revision number 6. Department is Recreation, account number 54158, capital outlay other. This is designed to move money to contributions to send to VRIA. They have other money that was given in honor and memory of Daryl Dotson and will complete the Arch project. And that will be transferred to 54168 contributions in the amount of $12,000. Budget before change, $33,000, reduced to $21,000. Budget increase after from $23,000, increased by $12,000 to $35,000.
I'll entertain a motion for the approval of internal budget revision number 6.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve internal budget revision number 6. Is there any further discussion?
I have a question. How much money does VRIA have to contribute to this project?
A little over $5,000.
Okay. So, now, did this project go out to bid?
It's a VRIA project that would not be subject to bid.
Right, but we're giving them $12,000 for this project.
Yes.
So, I mean, this is kind of a difficult one. I think that, I approved, I voted for this when it came before council, a couple months ago, whenever that was. It's been a while. Daryl Dotson was a very important man. He was very important in Vienna. And I said at that time, I'm not really a fan of putting people's names on things, but I think probably if anybody could transcend that, that would be Daryl Dotson. What concerns me about this is that the price keeps going up on it, and we have needed to put a lot of money into programs for VRA, into the fields and all that, we not programs, but the fields and all the different things that we had to do to accommodate VRIA and what their mission is, because now they're taking complete control of our sports, our youth sports. And so there's just a lot of money being put into that. And so I guess I have a little bit of a problem with putting another $12,000 into this as a memorial, or not a memorial, but I guess it was more of just to commemorate all the work that Mr. Dotson did. But it's just a lot of money, and I would rather see VRIA have an opportunity to do some more fundraising and help us with this lift instead of us carrying the majority of the lift.
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe so. The money was originally the 5,000 and some that they have, that was donated to them in special account to do something to honor him. And the park board is the one that was initiating they were the ones that wanted to put up the signs. So that was from the park board, but they couldn't spend money that wasn't there. So that's where the whole back and forth with VRIA saying, okay, we have to approve, if we're going to release the money to you, to the city to spend it, then they wanted to be able to approve what the sign was and that kind of thing. So that money was not VRIA money. That was money donated to them from the family. And the family was felt strongly about what kind of structure they wanted to honor Beryl Dotson. And so that is kind of how all of that evolved. It wasn't necessarily instigated by VRIA. That is money that they've held for a long, long time, specifically for that. And the park board is the one that was moving forward, wanting to get that completed. Is that right?
That is correct. And this is without a doubt one of the legacy projects that they have wanted for many, many years. And as far as the competitive bid, I have spent days trying to find any iron workers that can do that. There are none. It is just almost impossible. And so if I had to fill out a form, I would put the one bid from Smith Iron Works, and there are no other ones. None. They don't exist. All right. It's been moved and seconded that we approve internal budget revision. All those in favor of the resolution, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed, motion carries unanimously. Item number 4 this evening is an ordinance amending 951.01 definitions to include the pollinator garden and walking trail park located at 28th Street and First Avenue into the Vienna Park System. Be it ordained by the Common Council of the City of Vienna that whereas it is the intent of this ordinance to incorporate the pollinator garden and walking trail park located at 28th Street and First Avenue into the Vienna Park System for purposes of regulation as per Vienna Municipal Code Article 951 Park Regulations. 951.01 is hereby amended as follows. Park means Jackson Memorial Park, Spencer Park, McDonough Wildlife, Maplewood Park, the Walking Trail Park, and Pollinator Garden located at 28th Street and First Avenue, and all land controlled or managed by the Board of Parks and Recreation and the Director of Parks. I'll entertain a motion on first reading for the adoption of the ordinance amending 951.01 definitions.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the ordinance on first reading. Is there any further discussion?
I asked that this be put on the agenda this evening. I'm very excited about that piece of property, actually. Wasn't excited about how it came about as far as the walking trail goes, but the walking trail is such a plus to that. It's wonderful. I've seen people using it. I've been down there myself a few times. I enjoy it. It's a very nice piece of property, and I can see future development, but I think in order to preserve it, we need to go ahead and put it into the park system. I really believe, I go to the park board meetings all the time, and I feel that the park board really does a good job, and I think that they understand the mission and certainly the vision that Jack has had regarding that property of keeping it very passive recreation with the pollinator gardens, benches, and that kind of thing. But I really feel strongly that we should go ahead and make it official, put it into the park system, and hopefully sooner rather than later, at some point in time, Spencer's Landing will also come within the park system, and those two pieces of property really complement each other very well, and I think that they really just a crown jewel for the city of Vienna in the future. So I urge council to go ahead and put this into the park system, and let's go.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely piggyback off of everything that Kim Williams said. I think that that area up there is a huge benefit to the city, and really putting it into the park system and making it a part of our park system, with the hope that it can be developed alongside Spencer's Landing and really become part of that, the master plan that was done to kind of connect Spencer's Landing all the way up to McDonough through our parks that are through our community. I think that would be a huge benefit, and so I'm definitely 100% for this one.
To the rest of the members of council, I have to be honest with you this evening. I'm against this, and I'll tell you why. It doesn't make any difference whether it's part of the parks or whether it's, a part of the city, however you want to designate it. But I can tell you from a management standpoint that right now, that piece of property is being maintained by the Public Works Department at the same time that they manage Spencer's Landing. And I'm sorry, Ms. Williams Councilperson Williams is upset and spoke very harshly against this project because she wasn't involved. She didn't get to have a say in how this thing was designed, and yet it is part of the tree and beautification that set was designated because of the pollinator garden. All right? Now, if you want the Parks Department to be in charge of that pollinator garden, fine. But that means that the Parks Department has to take another mowing job on when they don't have the manpower now to maintain all of the areas in the city that we have to maintain. The Parks Department can do it very well, and so I would encourage this to not pass, simply from a management standpoint that, right now it works very well. And I'm sorry, just because someone didn't get to give their opinion of how the thing was designed or whatever does not make it that it has to be completely turned upside down and go a different direction.
I'm not upset about the walking trail, the design of the walking trail, or any of that. And I've said that so many times. As a matter of fact, I voted for that when we put it in next year's budget. What I was upset about, and I've made this clear this evening, I thought, was the fact that it happened without council approval, because oversight is what our responsibility really is. I think the walking trail is absolutely wonderful, okay? I find it entertaining, I guess, that the mower situation gets brought up again, because we tried to bring Spencer's Landing into the park system. We couldn't do it because of the mowing, and we can't manage to bring this into the system because of less than 2 acres worth of ground that has to be mowed. I think that's it. I don't find that to be that big of a challenge. I'm sure that can be worked out. I just think that if we're going to continue to make investment into this as a park, then we need to put it in its proper category into the park system. And, Mr. Mathers is also on the park board. He's going to be very well involved in the decisions in that board and what happens to that piece of property. But it's much better suited being under the management of the park board.
We are very fortunate that we have Jack Mathers that works for the city of Vienna. He is without a doubt one of the most creative and forward-thinking people that I've ever had the privilege to work with. But if you look at the next item on our agenda, that's exactly the same thing that's going to come up here in just a minute about the gifts, loans, services, and all that. Because Jack, through his contacts with the state and with all of the other forestry people, is very fortunate. I mean, he gets us money that we typically, without him, we wouldn't get any of it. And so that thing right there is another example of, we put the Tree and Beautification Commission together so that we could have nice things, that we can maintain the median and do all these things. And now all you want to do is put a set of handcuffs on and says, nope, we're not going to take any money from anybody that wants to give it to us unless we first approve it. If one of our citizens is willing to give us, $40,000 to go buy playground equipment, absolutely we should take that. It's an investment in our community. And that it's exactly the same as what the next one is if you're not at the table, then your feelings get hurt. And I'm sorry. I just absolutely, you all do whatever you like. It's a name, okay?
Respectfully, Mayor, I have a really hard time of jumping ahead in the agenda. We're talking about bringing a plot of land that is very clearly being developed as a park into the park system. I don't know, and I know that the department heads work really well together and have even spoken with the department heads of the Public Works Department and the Parks Department, and they share equipment and share manpower frequently to get the mowing and the maintenance of our properties taken care of, and that has never been an issue. If we're developing this as a park, then let's define it as a park and call it that. I don't think there's any further discussion about. I'm not even sure what the rest of the discussion is about. If it's a park, then let's just call it a park, and I think that's what this ordinance and the change in this ordinance is trying to do.
Tom?
Has there been any discussion with the department heads of the parks and the public works? I mean, 2 acres, I don't know how long it takes to cut 2 acres, but I would think it would take more than 5 minutes. And,
How much?
I said it would take more than 5 minutes.
Well,
I was a little sarcasm there. I'm sorry.
thank you. You know what? We're a democracy. Majority rules. If that's what you all think, fine. I'm just telling you that from the person that assigns the duties to the Parks Department and the Public Works Department, it works just great the way it is. Okay? Now, I can live with whatever you want. I don't care. Okay?
So I understand the focus of this discussion, and I really like what Tom asked, is do we have input from Public Works and the Parks Department, department heads? Because I hear Kim and Chris saying, if it's a park, call it a park, make it a park. And I hear the mayor saying, as a practical matter, pulling the Parks Department down there because Spencer's Landing hasn't achieved that goal, which I do expect it will in the future. So what do the department heads think?
If the Parks Department has to take over the mowing, Craig will have to transfer one of his employees from Public Works to the Parks Department. We're already 3 men short in the Public Works Department. We cannot afford to give up any more employees to go to the Parks Department. And we're not having any ability to hire anyone because we can't find people that will come to work in the Public Works Department.
Could I move that we table this till the next meeting and have the department heads come in and advise us?
We have a motion to table this until the second meeting. Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded that we table this item until the next meeting. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, then all in favor of tabling this until the next meeting, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed? Okay, so it's 5-1, and Chris, I didn't see you vote, so you voted for it. Okay, 6-1. Okay, so this will be tabled until the next item, and I will request the department heads to show up. Last item on our, or the next to last item on our agenda this evening is an ordinance codifying a procedure for the acceptance of gifts, loans, services, or goods of a value more than $1,000 from a governmental or nonprofit organization. Be it ordained by the Common Council of the City of Vienna that whenever any federal or state government or nonprofit organization, agency, or officer thereof shall offer to the city services, equipment, supplies, materials, or funds over $1,000 in value by way of gift, grant, or loan, the city, acting only with the consent of City Council, may accept such offer by resolution. Upon council's acceptance, the mayor may authorize any officer of the city to receive such services, equipment, supplies, materials, or funds on behalf of the city and subject to the terms of the offer and the rules and regulations, if any, of the agency making the offer. I'll entertain a motion on first reading for the adoption of the ordinance codifying a procedure for the acceptance of gifts, loans, services, or goods of a value more than $1,000.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve on first reading. Is there any discussion? Ms. Williams, this is yours. I'd like to have a little explanation.
Absolutely. I'm happy to provide an explanation versus you attributing why I did this. I did this. I don't know why the city of Vienna, actually, this is the only place I've ever seen that didn't, as a matter of procedure, just accept the grant. And accepting the grant is not because we're going to accept somebody's gift. It's not like saying, oh, I don't want your gift. That's not the reason for it at all. Mr. Mathers does a great job of going out, and he has connections with people, and he's able to get this grant money, which is absolutely fabulous. I wish we would get more grant money. I wish we can, hopefully we can do that. But the reason I have this on the agenda tonight is because that grant money really council needs to be aware that the grant exists, that the money is coming back into the budget. And what prompted this, once again, I go back to those walking trails, which I love, but that money, what allowed that to happen was Mr. Mathers went out and got a couple grants. I think they were two. One was $10,000 and one was $5,000. I'm not quite sure. But at any rate, he was able to add that to the tree commission budget, and then that gave then enough money for the walking trail to be designed and then, to be asphalted and so on and so forth. That's all wonderful, but once again, we're circumventing the process of council so that we are aware that money's coming in, and it's this discretionary spending is going to happen. So it's good to know when money comes in, and grants are memorialized in the minutes. Somebody can come back, 5 years from now and read the minutes and say, XYZ Foundation, boy, they were generous. They gave the city of Vienna $20,000 to do whatever. Okay, so it's just a good policy. I don't understand why we don't do it, and there are no, motives here other than trying to just be upfront and transparent on our money, how we spend our money effectively, efficiently, and so on. So that's why I requested it.
Yeah, I think there's kind of two, maybe three things for me of why I seconded this and why I think it's valuable. One, I think Kim mentioned, I think it's valuable to the city to kind of commemorate and even celebrate the fact that we are successful in obtaining grants. That's a big deal, and that's free money that we don't have to use taxpayer money to go towards things. We should kind of celebrate that. I think that's awesome. And secondly, I think it's helpful to kind of just be aware of that money coming and flowing through the city a little bit more, because I wasn't aware that we were receiving grants for the pollinator garden, and that's huge. I think that's a great benefit. Same thing for if we were to develop Spencer's Landing or for the pool. I would love to hear and be aware that, hey, we've received grants for the pool. We know that that's a big project coming up, and we're applying for grants. Let's celebrate those grants to help kind of offset what we know is going to be a really big cost for the city, and make people aware of that. And that's why I think that this has a benefit to the city. Thirdly, it's kind of, as far as my understanding goes, it's fairly kind of a common practice, even within other municipalities, to not necessarily say, hey, we reject or accept this, but simply to kind of acknowledge the fact that we're receiving grant money and it's coming into our budget. So those are kind of the reasons I think that this is valuable for the city of Vienna as well.
This seems fairly benign to me, as far as a resolution, because if I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's just basically saying that there would be a record of acceptance and placement of the money and for the purpose of that grant money. Do I have that right?
You have it absolutely correct.
Chris, you're applying for a grant for the bicycle park.
Correct.
Did you have permission to do that?
I haven't received any grant money yet, so.
But you're applying though.
Correct.
Yes. It's the same thing with how all of these grants work. Okay? We reach out to these funding sources to see if we can get money.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And so every time that we get a grant or we get some sort of funding, unless there is matching funds that are required for the city to put up, which I don't believe we should be going into any grant if there's a matching fund without council first approving those dollars. If there's a 20% match, that money has to come from somewhere.
Correct.
Yes, okay? And so that's the whole issue with this. When you start looking at grants, and there's money out there if you're willing to go for it.
Yeah.
Okay, there
Yeah.
are. All right? But this is another one of those issues right here that now, simply because someone wasn't invited to be part of the discussion, this comes up this happens to be tonight, okay? All right? So if this is the way the ordinance is adopted, then every grant that we have, every grant that we're applying for will now have to come before council. All right?
Yeah, the way I understand it is if we are awarded a grant, and shoot, I would be happy to celebrate being awarded a grant for the bicycle trails. And I would be happy to bring that before council and accept it and use that money as the way the grant was appropriated.
Okay, so
I don't see any
it's
issue
the
with
same,
that.
it's the same pathway.
Yeah.
No. It's the same pathway when you look for grants with Jack going to the forestry department or getting a matching grant for some of the things that we do.
Mm-hmm.
You apply for lots of grants, you only get a handful.
Right.
That's just the way it is. There's too many people out there, and, you know, we're very fortunate to get a share of it. Okay?
Yeah.
I kind of see this as adding layers too. So, like Chris, you're applying for grants for the bicycle path. Do you have authority to do that? If it has to be accepted, is that going to be, are you telling these people, I'm applying for this grant and I hope you give it to me, but if you do, it has to be approved by a vote of city council? So,
No.
well, yeah, but take it to its logical conclusion. So we can only accept a grant that has no strings if it's accepted by vote by city council, adding another layer of what? And so if there's no strings, now I can see maybe amending this to say any grant in excess of or in any amount. I mean, if somebody donates the proceeds from a lemonade sale, you know, that maybe we acknowledge it certainly, and often we do in front of council with the newspaper here, thank people and acknowledge these gifts. And Jack Mathers often gets complimented on his efforts in doing this. But I don't see how you know, because I can see if I was going to, you know, if I was opposed to this grant for the bicycle path, I say you don't have authority to apply for it unless it's approved in advance by council. I mean, can you see how that plays out?
But that's not what this ordinance is doing at all.
What is it doing? That's what I don't understand.
It's exactly what you said in the beginning. We're simply
saying we have to approve free
no.
money.
No, we're acknowledging the acceptance
Well, that's
of free
different
money.
than what this is worded. This says that acting only with the consent of city council may accept such offer. This says that after the fact, and that this offer of a grant with no strings has been made, we are not able to accept that until we vote on it. And what does that do? I don't even understand it.
Well, I guess I'll have to defer to Russ on that a little bit because the way that I understood it was more of a formality in accepting grant money.
I think
in acknowledging that.
Maybe different.
The problem that I see with this is if you apply for a grant and the grant comes through and then for whatever reason, council says, no, we're not going to take that grant. The people that are on these grant boards are going to look at us and say, hey, if you didn't want the money, why'd you apply for it? And then you explain to them, well, our process is that we have to have it approved by council, and council says, no, we're not going to do that. You know, it just leaves a sour taste in the people that run a lot of the grants.
It also puts a duty on you to disclose when you apply for these grants that this is subject to council approval. So you need to know, I'm asking you for money, but if you offer it, it still has to be approved. And they're like, what does that mean? That's just nonsensical.
I don't see it as approval. I mean, it's like I said there a little bit ago. I mean, if we have something that we recognize and um, for acceptance and the placement of the grant money for the purpose that it's intended. Maybe that you mentioned acknowledgement. That maybe that's better. Approval is. I'm not thinking of this as approval. I'm thinking of it as acceptance and recognition and placement for the purpose of the grant money.
Mr. Azinger.
Well, the only practical way to do it would be to get council's approval to apply for the grant. Because why apply without prior approval? Am I right or wrong?
No, sir, you're right. I mean, that eliminates a lot of these steps. Okay? You discussed.
I think that could probably be addressed in a different ordinance. I've never, normally, if somebody is going to apply for a grant, then that's approved by council to go and apply. In a situation where it's like an 80-20 grant, or we're going to apply for it. I think the last thing that comes to memory for me is the mayor back in October or whatever of 2020 had applied for the kayak launch grant, okay? So he came before council, got that approval, went out, got the grant money, and then, we came back with it. This is, if you want to change it from approval to acknowledgement, that's fine. But what the problem with this is, Mr. Mathers went out and got free money. He didn't ask for council's approval to do that. And so I don't think that he needed to ask for council's approval to do that. The problem was that the money came back and then was put into the budget, and then council didn't know about it. And then that money, it created a windfall that then we were able to do something else with it, which was that walking trail, when that was supposed to be in next year's budget. Once again, the theme of this evening is about oversight or the lack thereof. I have never seen a deliberative body not recognize that we are bringing money in. I just don't understand that. That to me is, and I did have a conversation with Mr. Skogstad about it, and maybe he'll weigh in on this a little bit, but we had a pretty in-depth conversation about it, and he thought this was a good idea. It just seems to be that for whatever reason, there is an avoidance of wanting to recognize that money is coming in to the budget, and we're going to spend it in some way, because we want to keep council in the dark, and that is my issue with the whole entire thing. Free money is great, or money that you're going to, an 80-20 situation. And why this is particularly important now, of all times, is because, we have a $6.5 million pool coming up, and hopefully we're going to be able to get some foundations, some people that want to help us with that project. And so we need to be able to come back and say, hey, this foundation gave us, $100,000, and we're going to accept that. And then we know that $100,000 is going into that line for the pool, that it's open and transparent. This, once again, is government, okay? This is not a private business. I run a private business. My private business, I don't spread my business to the world. You're not going to see what's in my bank account or what kind of decisions I make. But in government, it's sunlight, okay? It's supposed to be open so people can understand what's going on and how their money is being spent. There's a difference, and maybe, everybody doesn't agree with me, and that's fine, but I feel like, we have a responsibility to be open and transparent with how we spend our money.
I can see what you're saying, but I don't feel like this is the solution. Like when I'm hearing you explain the situation or the problem, if we may say, I don't, as I'm doing my problem solving in my head of what you're talking about, this resolution doesn't answer that for me, or this ordinance doesn't answer that for me. I don't know if there's another protocol or if there's another communication or something that we implement amongst the council or anything like that, but To
I just
me,
tell
as
you
I'm
this
putting
real
that
quick?
together, this doesn't answer that question.
I
that
did
problem.
not just create this. I actually went and looked at several cities in West Virginia and have found this is verbatim. And I'm sorry, I didn't make a note. Can't remember off the top of my head where this came from. But if you go and you look at several cities and you just, I guess you'll probably just type it into Google and find it. But it's not created out of whole cloth. This is just.
Sure, yeah, no, I get
So
that.
this is what I'm saying. There are other
Yeah.
cities that do the exact same thing. This is where it came from. So that's why I suggested it.
So what if instead we said that funds that come in from a grant over the amount of $1,000 need to be earmarked? I mean, so that council, then there's, I mean, so we know what the purpose of the grant is and what the intent for the money is. I mean, I think does that satisfy? Isn't that what you're saying, that this money came in for the walking trails, that Jack went out, secured the funds, that's where they went, council didn't know it, and the need for transparency in that regard is earmarking grant funds. In other words, what's the intended purpose? Because often, just like we saw with Daryl Dotson, there's a very specific reason this money was raised. And that was to create this, I mean.
So is it sort of a good problem he got the money before we thought, like, we have this budgeted in next year's budget, but he got the money so soon that we decided to use it? Now, is that, I'm trying to understand. I mean, is it like then are you concerned about the money that we've already budgeted for next year and what that's going to be used for if we've already technically taken care of?
I'm going to draw this out and let's go 30,000 feet, okay? And forget about the walking trails for a minute, but that's what precipitated the whole thing in my mind. Number one, it's acknowledgement to whatever foundation or whoever was generous enough to give us money. We need to be grateful for that, okay? Number two, that we have a clear idea of where that money is going, what line item in the budget it's going to, and for what its purpose is, and that whatever its purpose is, that those are followed, okay? So back to the language of the ordinance, like I said, I just got it from a couple other municipalities. I don't know the difference between saying we approve it versus it's earmarked. If there needs to be a word inserted in that is a more friendly word that makes everybody feel better, that's fine with me. That's not the point. The point is that we acknowledge that we've got money and that we acknowledge where that money is going to go and we acknowledge how that money is going to be spent.
If I may answer the questions that were asked, this ordinance does require that anytime there's a donation in an amount more than $1,000, that it can't be accepted unless it's done by resolution by council. Generally speaking, that probably wouldn't affect most projects, but there are instances where grants have where you do an application for a grant, as the mayor very clearly pointed out, and then you've gone through the process, you've applied for a grant, and then you come back to the grant to whatever the granting body is and say, well, council didn't approve it, sorry. And then they get irritated with you because they feel you've wasted their time and you've kept that money from going to somewhere else. That's the downside of this.
A grant for a vape shop?
I don't know. A grant for whatever. So that's the downside of this. But what this does is any donation, grant, loan would require council's approval. All right. The upside of that is council's going to know about every grant, loan, gift, or what have you that is above $1,000 that comes to the city, which obviates what is the problem that it seems to be here. I think you all can figure out what the issue is. So the upside is it solves that problem, which is council now knows about everything that's over $1,000 that's bequested to the city. The downside is there are instances where that could potentially negatively affect other grants that are given in the future. As far as the park goes, I've reviewed everything, all of the documentation and everything that I've seen with the walking trail in the park. I don't think it was done illegally. It doesn't violate the state statute because it doesn't burden next year's budget, even though there was money allocated for it. And it's actually a windfall to some degree for the city. And the materials were already purchased under a pre-existing, I guess we'll call it asphalt, was already purchased under a pre-existing contract. We have a contract with Brown's Asphalt, which actually there'll be a new bid go out in the next month or two for the next year. And under that contract, or that agreement, it was set up that we bought asphalt at a certain rate for a certain amount on an as-needed basis. So what happened was, Mr. Mathers, at least as I understand it, Mr. Mathers was able to get grant money that offset that grant money that was essentially a windfall that was used to purchase the walking trail. The walking trail was able to be purchased this year as opposed to out of next year's budget, meaning you have money in next year's budget that you can reallocate for whatever you need. Now, the remedy in that is, if council's truly concerned that that the walking trail was done in some fashion that you don't like, or the council doesn't like the way that the walking trail was administered, is to simply not allocate funds to whatever commission that it was under for the next year. But I don't see anything illegal in how it was done. So then that just leaves the communication issue. This would address the communication issue, but it creates that additional problem that there are possibilities that it can negatively affect grants in the event that council doesn't approve.
Okay.
Right? If you want to do something else, you could simply write something that says all gifts, grants, bequests, whatever, have to be not brought before council, not for approval, but just disclosed to council in a meeting.
Yeah, and I think I understand that and what you're saying there. And I mean, realistically, what council member would vote against accepting free money? I mean, I think if a council member really had it out for another council member, then maybe, but I can't see council ever saying,
well, you could get a grant. You could ask for a grant from I don't want to say a political organization, but a nonprofit organization that you don't have the same views as political views. Sure. And I'm not going to single any out because I don't know of any off the top of my head, but there could be one that says we'll give you $1,000 to do X and you really don't like X, right? Or 5 of the council members don't like X, or 4, or whatever. And that could be there. Now, realistically, how often does that occur?
I have a question, Russ. Well, I mean, just going by what you just said about the $45,000, it's actually in next year's budget for the walking trail. We completed that walking trail. So now what's that $45,000 going to be used for? We don't know. It didn't get captured in the carryover. So, I mean, well, I wouldn't, but now there's $45,000 allocated in next year's budget for a walking trail. Well, we've already completed it. So now we have $45,000 that really is kind of discretionary, can be used for something else. But I think for tonight, I'm going to make a motion to table this ordinance to work on the language a little bit, because I'm hearing where everybody's uncomfortable. And I think if we can make some improvement and probably get to a better outcome. So I motion to table this.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we table this ordinance till the next council meeting. Is there any more discussion?
Just this. With respect to the issue of budgeted funds for the walking trail that's already been completed with grant funds, there's no discretion. If it's not allocated to that, just like we used the $15,000 example to tear down houses, it just returned as unencumbered funds and it gets returned at the end of the budget. Mm-hmm. There's not an ability to divert that to some other project, okay? But aside from that, that's unencumbered.
Not without a budget revision, Jim.
Right.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded that we table this. All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed? 6-1. I'm sorry. All right. All right, the last item on our agenda this evening is an update on the swimming pool.
Yes. So we've got good news. It has gone out to bid. It's out in the paper, and There will be a second publishing of it. The pre-bid meeting is mandatory. It's going to be July 5th for any interested contractors to meet with Omni and get their questions answered. And all the bids are due July 26th. Omni will review those. They have the capacity to tell whether or not all of the qualifications and everything that needed to be supplied has been supplied. And then we will meet with them to discuss what our options are. So very, very excited about that.
The bids, will it be one bid for the whole thing, or will it be broken down into components?
It will be one bid for the whole thing.
We won't know what the waiting pool will cost.
I can't say that definitively. I would say there would be a breakdown. We'd be able to see what they're spending on what, but the main number will have one big,
Right, but
one number for the whole project, yes.
We'll know what each component will cost.
Yeah, correct.
That was one of my questions too. Do you know if we put alternates in the bid so that we could either accept or reject portions of the project if it's way over?
I believe we did. Boy, that's a good question on the spot.
I think that's what Tom was asking.
I think we did. I cannot say that for sure, but
Okay.
We have access to the bids.
I could look into that. Yeah. I can send that to you guys. Yeah, I'll send it to you. Mhm.
Great.
Yeah. It's actually in it's a link, so I will send it to you through email. That'll be the best way to do it. Oh, okay. Okay, yeah.
Any other council comments this evening?
I have a brief comment. It has been brought to my attention of recent, and I've heard this along for a good while, that the people in Vienna, they have no idea what's going on in the city and what the city council is doing. In discussions with some of these folks, I'm finding out that they're saying, well, we didn't know that, the meetings were live streamed or they were public meetings that we could come to. We thought we had to sign up for them. We didn't know that the council meetings was on YouTube. So, I've been on council for a long time, and I think that probably, even though there might be some minor issues with it, I think transparency is better now on council than it has been in the past. But my point is this, through the media or whatever, maybe we should take another stab at getting information out there that they are public meetings. You can tell by our packed house tonight how many people was interested in what's going on in the city. But they are live streamed. The meetings are on YouTube. You can go back and look at previous meetings. So, for those folks that says, well, we wasn't aware of that, we need to get somehow let them know there's a city website. They're live streamed. They're on YouTube. Public meetings. And we can always set more chairs out for those that come to the meetings. So,
Roger, the next time that and I will try to do this every time, the next time we do the newsletter, we'll put a section in there that says we're live streaming, that, these things are available. We'll try to put out more information for that. We have a lady that is working to redesign, and I don't mean create a new one, but make our website more user-friendly. And so she's just getting started doing that. Once we get into that, perhaps we can have her put up a separate layer for the senior center. okay? But it's just difficult to get information submitted to do that. It's hard just to keep the calendar up to date, okay? And so,
Yeah.
but we'll try to do that because, you know, people, you're right. You can't make them come, but at least we can do those things to make it easier to access. All right? So we'll try to do that.
I have a comment, if I may. First of all, I just want to mention that today was the senior picnic, and I had an opportunity to attend, and it was really wonderful. I attended last year, and it was really super hot, and so this year it was much cooler. So I appreciated that. The turnout was fantastic, and Linda Kern, Liz Hamperian, and all the guys that work for the Parks Department, really, they did one heck of a job. But to what Roger was saying, I had several people come up to me and were like, "Oh, we didn't know about this. My friend just called me and told me about it." So sometimes I think that it is hard to communicate with people. And Facebook, Miss Powell was talking about a Facebook page for the senior center. I think that's one heck of a good idea because there are so many different activities going on with their schedules that it would be really easy for them to go on to a Facebook page just for the senior center to keep up with that. The newsletter is great, but it's not all that timely. We put it out quarterly. And websites, although are better than nothing, but it seems that people really gravitate to Facebook, especially older people. So I understand some of the challenges with that. I manage several Facebook pages myself, and you don't want something inappropriate going out and so on, and it has to be carefully monitored and managed. But I think that that's pretty easily done by setting what the rules of the road are going to be, how we're not going to engage in certain things or say certain things or whatever, and keep it focused on the task at hand, which would be the senior center. So I hope that we can do that, because I think the more that we can get our seniors out and active in the senior center, because there's so many wonderful things going on there, that's beneficial to everybody.
Roger, if you would pass on to the fire department, thanks for the wonderful ice cream social. It's one of the best attended ones that we've had for a long time. And it truly is a community event that everybody looks forward to every year. So anyway, thank them for all their hard work, and we really appreciate that. So, all right.
One other thing. So we did put in next year's budget some money to discuss, for lack of a better term, whether we're interested in the city advocate, developer, so on. Some of the things you're talking about with Facebook seniors and issues, everything. So I'd like to, now that we're kind of approaching that budget period, I'd like to get a discussion point for that, considering a position on an upcoming council agenda, so we can start talking about it.
It won't be needed as a job description, Jim.
Well, to tell you the truth, my thought is, this is not a job description I think that is going to come from one of us. Okay, I think that my view, and only one opinion, is that the caliber of individual it would take to fulfill the role that I'm talking about is substantial, and that it would take not only, just like we did with the pool, or with big projects that might be beyond our collective expertise, that we may engage a consultant to say, what could we? And that was my purpose in trying to put it on the agenda. What could we envision? Because, there are communities around the United States that have developed models, and we always say, just like several times tonight, I looked what other municipalities are doing. I looked what and that's where we're drawing from. Just because somebody else is doing it doesn't make it a good idea. But I think, we talk about how much money we returned in unencumbered funds from the city because we've been blessed with a good tax base and also favorable winds, I'll call it. So I don't know that this position is necessarily going to spring from, even the collective wisdom of this council, but would require some professional input to say, what is achievable? What would it cost to do that? And there are examples, and I've mentioned before, it doesn't it's not apples to apples, but the villages in Florida, they have developed a senior community concept that is head and shoulders above really anything else that's, that as I read about it, that's been created in the United States for other, retirement communities. They just have created an entirely new model, and it's fantastic. We have in Vienna all of these wonderful building blocks, right? Our park system, our tax base, our, on and on and on. And what could somebody who supports that effort to really develop it, at, I think Kim said, at 30,000 feet, they're not responsible for day in, day out calls that the mayor gets and the department heads get, and we get even. So it's just, I just want to put it on the agenda to talk about, and are we interested? And if we are we willing to invest even just a little bit to put a toe in the water and see what that might look like? And so I'd like to get that just as a discussion point.
On the next agenda?
Yes.
The last thing before I let you all go, don't forget, next weekend, not this weekend coming up, but next weekend is what I consider to be the premier event in the Valley. The Freedom Festival will be Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The music lineup is fantastic. We ought to have way bigger crowds this year than we did last year, and last year was overwhelming. But the hot air balloons, the rodeo, the carnival, all the food trucks, all of the other things, the entertainment, it is going to be very well attended, and I hope to see you all there because it's going to be great. So next weekend, Freedom Festival, okay? All right, with that, meeting adjourned.